Well, welcome to the bottom line. This is Patrick Woodcock with the Maine State Chamber of Commerce hosting today's podcast and a special guest with us today as we embark on yet another summer tourism season with the milestone of the Memorial Day weekend. I am so pleased to have with us today Tony Cameron, who is CEO of the Maine Tourism Association. Welcome.
Thanks, Patrick. Happy to be here.
So I have to start always with an introduction and maybe throw in how you celebrated your Memorial Day weekend. But really, what led you to become CEO of such an important organization for Maine's economy?
Yeah, well, I mean, I grew up here in Maine. Maine is my home, and I can't think of a prouder industry or state to represent than Maine and Maine tourism. So, like most things, I don't think anyone ever dreamt about becoming an association executive or leading a trade association. But here I am, and I definitely worked my way up through various things. Definitely I got my start in tourism working for the Portland Sea Dogs in the front office for a few years, and then actually made my way to Bar Harbor and worked for the Bar Harbor Chamber for a number of years. And I can tell you that there's no harder community region to work for than the communities up on MDI in the Down East region. There's a lot of high expectations, as you might imagine, but also such incredible opportunity, incredible beauty when it comes to the state and what it represents. But had a number of opportunities with some chambers as the executive director at Ellsworth Chamber and then Booth Bay Harbor, and then have been here at MTA for the last 11 years, becoming CEO the second week of March of 2020, right before things really kind of went south really quickly. Thankfully, I knew the industry and all the partners, and we were able to manage that situation the best that we could as we all look back at during the challenges that brought us. But I absolutely love this industry. I love the fact that it is such a huge economic part of the state and really the heartbeat of Maine, but also the fact that we're in the making business. We're in the fun business. And we need to remember that taking vacation and traveling is such an important part of life and what we do as humans and the things that we need. And it's what people are going to remember at the end of the day. And so, it's awesome to be able to represent the businesses and the people of Maine when it comes to the tourism industry. So yeah, I think it's a great fit. I feel like when I go to different destinations and different conferences around the country, people find out that you're from Maine and you represent Maine. There's like a natural connection that people have, and often very, very, my position is very envious amongst our peers that have similar jobs in other states. So I feel pretty lucky.
Yeah, it's an amazing, authentic brand we have that is based on experience, as you mentioned, that goes back to childhood. We can't keep that for granted. Making sure that we have positive experiences and continue to grow, and ultimately that public policy enables tourism to thrive. I did want to ask you about the outlook. Memorial Day weekend. I saw Maine Turnpike Authority. I think they said they thought they would hit maybe 1 million visitors. Any um any assessment right now for the outlook for the summer tourism season?
Yeah, so I mean, the entire summer that's a big question, right? There's a lot to kind of take in there, and there's a lot of different factors that play into it. So we look at a number of different factors when we kind of look at the overall outlook, and right now this is a snapshot in time. There's so many things that can happen that can change how things go. So certainly overall, I think the majority of businesses are feeling like this is going to be a very similar year to last year. or maybe a little bit better, feeling a little bit optimistic about it. With that comes definitely some caveats. Gas prices are remaining higher than normal for summer. There's definitely some uncertainty economically, and as that uncertainty and those gas prices have kind of stayed where they have been for the last couple of months, has certainly put more people on a little bit more of a holding pattern, or slightly more tendency to spend more money. With that said, travel demand remains extremely high. People want to take their vacations. When we look at national travel sentiments, American travelers want to take their vacation. They want to go out and have those memories. So some of summer has already been booked for those people who are pre-planners, and which we highly encourage people to do. Um, but it may change some of their spending habits. They may, eat out a little bit less. Back during the recession, we saw a lot of pizza boxes and stuff like that in rooms. So maybe a little bit more takeout. However, we also know that being a drive market, that positions us somewhat well within this landscape. Higher airfare tends to lead to more people wanting to stay closer to home, and because we are in such a huge range of so many millions of people's within a day's drive, that puts Maine in a really good position. But we have to market, and we have to keep our foot on the gas pedal to be able to gain that traffic, because every other destination in New England, Mid-Atlantic, is doing the same thing that we're trying to do and trying to capture that traffic. So I would say that there's definitely some optimism that we're going to have a decent year. Weather plays a factor into that, which we can't predict. Um, but there's still some uncertainties, and that's not to minimize some of the bigger challenges that are out there. International traffic will most likely remain down. That's an entire country as well as Maine. Uh, the Canadian traffic specifically is part of our landscape that we're still, we really don't anticipate any changes with that this year. So, there's definitely some challenges that are out there, and by no means should we ever minimize those challenges. So there's definitely some things to be optimistic about, but definitely some challenges that are out there.
I think some of the takeaways from last year was that visitation was slightly down, but spending was up. Can you talk about that trend line and what that really reveals about Maine tourism in 2025 and 2026?
Yeah, so there's kind of like, it's kind of like good and bad news, right? Oftentimes there's a lot of fixation on the total number of visitors coming to Maine as being like the fact that, the baseline of, was it a good year or wasn't it a good year based off of the number of visitors that come. And the reality of it is really how much of those visitors stay, how much of they spend in when they're here, is really more of the economic impact of it. And when it comes to some destinations that have very high traffic, trying to have a little bit more of a balance of high value travelers when they come, with less travelers, certainly can create a better visitor experience for the visitor, but also for the local communities as well, with still having a good economic impact. Um, but with that said, anytime you have a decrease in visitation, you kind of have to wonder, what's going on? What are some of the factors going into that? With higher spending too, obviously things are costing more as well. So there's some of that needs to be taken into consideration. But ultimately, when people are here, we want to measure: are they staying longer? Are they eating out? Are they engaging in the attractions? How are they spending their money? Are they good value travelers? Um, One of the things I always want to look at is first time visitation, attracting for people to come to Maine for the first time. And it, because we know that when people come to Maine, they're very, very likely to return, or to recommend Maine to a friend or a relative. So, the traveler satisfaction here in Maine is one of the highest in the country. People always value Maine as a great destination to visit. So, we obviously need to attract new generations to come to Maine in order to keep things going. So, anytime travel, visitation is down, that's a market share that we're missing too. So, um, but when people are spending a little bit more, those are good factors. And if places like, Bar Harbor and Kennebunkport and some of the higher, traffic destinations can continue to get the economic share, then those are good things.
I do want to drill down into the international travel. I have one of my summer jobs was working in Bar Harbor, at the Regency and the whale watching operation, Royal Miss Belmar. I was struck by how many Asian tourists were coming to Bar Harbor. And, what have you seen shifts of international travel? You mentioned Canada. Obviously, that's been a big headline. But any other international visitation trends that we've been seeing?
Yeah, so overall, the United States is a little bit of an anomaly amongst other countries over the last couple of years that the US has seen an actual decline in inbound visitation compared to pretty much every other country that's out there. Um, and there's a few different reasons for that. One is certainly some of the political climate and rhetoric that happens. Um, the other side of that is our transportation infrastructure is woefully behind so many other countries. Visa wait times to get into the country are higher than other places. There's certainly some optics that foreigners might be caught up at the border. And, statistically, there's nothing that really proves that, but there's a perception that that's happening. So there's a lot of different things that are out there. That and the United States is a very expensive destination compared to other countries that you can go to. So all those factors really, puts us behind the eight ball. And there is some good stuff that is happening. There are some transportation, legislation that's out there that is going to improve air traffic control, technology and some transportation, but we are still woefully behind other countries. Um, and so that's going to continue to impact us. We also need to figure out a way to to um, to provide a great experience for visitors internationally, at price points that they're more accustomed to. So, those are a lot of different factors that go into it. When international travelers come to the United States, though, they're awesome because we have them. They do spend a lot of money and they spend a lot of time here. So, we're what's typically known as like a third tier destination because we don't have a true international hub. And so we rely on international travelers typically coming into New York or Boston, and then traveling throughout New England. And so anytime that we can capture that traffic is good. Um, with the World Cup that's happening this year, there's some hope that some of that traffic can be capitalized off of, especially with a lot of the momentum with the Hearts of Pine and the notoriety and trends that have been happening with that. But also like those are very, very expensive events. And so hopefully we can capitalize a little bit off of that. But I don't see any real improvements with international traffic for a little while.
Yeah. You want to expand on the Canadian situation? There are a lot of factors you mentioned, the political friction between the countries, also the Canadian dollar. But what is the outlook for returning to, uh, I guess, a historic levels of tourism, or is this the new normal?
I th That's a great question, Patrick. I don't think that we had ever fully recovered from from the pandemic and gaining back all the Canadian traffic that we had lost from the pre-pandemic levels. So we're still trying to recover some of that. Uh, I think right now it's a matter of national pride with Canadians. I when it comes to actually what we have to offer, I think that there's a lot of deep connections that Maine and Canadians have together, and I think that there's a lot of respect between Maine and Canada. And all the things that we hear from the visitors are we really appreciate everything that Maine does. We love Maine. We want to come back to Maine. We just can't do it right now. Um, it's it's sad because a lot of times when there's political discourse, it doesn't really move the needle when it comes to travel. But this has certainly moved the needle, in some negative ways. But it affects some communities more than it affects other communities. And so, the Canadian segment of our traffic is definitely an important part of it, but it's not the entire industry, of course. So, and I don't want to minimize anything because there's a lot of border communities that rely heavily on the Canadian traffic. Um, and there's a lot of destinations that rely heavily on it and they need it to survive. So it's important that they feel welcomed and that they know that we will always be ready for them to come when they're ready to come, and that, you know, ultimately our job is to make them feel like they're having a great experience and creating great memories and not necessarily thinking about anything negative that's going on in the world. We're here to provide a good experience. So that's ultimately what we want. I do hope it will come back. I think it will in time. I think it will definitely take a little bit of effort and definitely some marketing to be able to win back some of that traffic. But we are in a great place. We're surrounded by Canada here in Maine, so it's important that we keep that bridge open and making sure that they all feel welcomed.
Well, I was just in Aroostook County yesterday. A lot of those welcome Canadian signs that, little gestures. Last week we were in Washington, D.C., and we visited the Quebec office as just a gesture of goodwill. There's a lot of things we don't control here in Maine, but we do have a relationship outside of the U.S.-Canada relationship, Maine relationship with New Brunswick and Quebec. I think this is a good time to take our break. I did want to turn when we return to trends that we're seeing and really going to focus on how we spread tourism's growth across the state. We'll be right back on the bottom line. This is Patrick Woodcock.
I've been traveling north from Norway to Grant's Kennebago camps on the crystal clear waters of Kennebago Lake near Rangeley for over 50 years, and it won't be long before I'm headed back fly fishing for native brook trout, brown trout, and salmon in one of the most pristine settings anywhere in North America. And what always stands out to me is the stunning beauty of this area, filled with wildlife like moose grazing in the Norton Brook area, easily seen from Grant's dining room, in the main lodge on the shores of the lake, along with haunting and beautiful calls of the loons as they cruise by the camps day and night. And if fly fishing isn't for you, then paddle a canoe or kayak, take a refreshing swim, or walk the miles of hiking trails, or even ride your mountain bike on the camp road next to the lake and river. In the meantime, you'll enjoy 3 home-cooked meals a day and stay in cabins that sit on the water's edge with screened-in porches where you can relax and enjoy the breathtaking natural beauty of the lake and the mountains around it. Owner John Blunt, along with granddaughters Madison and Courtney, are always there to greet you in the fishing on either the lake or in the river. It is simply legendary. So take it from me, a family trip to Grants will change your whole perspective of what an adventure vacation can mean. Go to grantscamps.com for all the information and reservations, and it's very likely that you'll see me there.
And we're back. We were just picking up, Tony, on trends that we've seen. I'm always struck by seeing it was a great ski season, the tourism season. I live in Portland, just seeing how it keeps extending further and further into fall, into winter. really, what do the stats say on Maine tourism's growth and historically the shoulder seasons and winter?
Yeah, so fall specifically has really picked up over the last, decade or so. I would say that September and October have become in some places as busy as July and August, and so those have been really good things to see. Um, and I think that there's a lot of factors that have gone into that. Certainly a little bit more marketing efforts, but also the fact that businesses are staying open longer, allow for more people to come and have access to things to do and see and stay. So there's been some really good positive movement, definitely within the fall season. Winter remains a little bit one of those unknown factors, even more so than some of the other seasons lately, because a lot of the success of winter relies on weather. We need snow. We know that the ski resorts obviously have the capability of making their own, but they have to still have the right conditions to be able to do that. Snowmobiling, cross-country skiing, and some of the other activities, ice fishing, need snow and they need cold weather. And the winters over the last several years haven't necessarily been as predictable or as consistent as we'd like, and that creates definitely some challenges. So, you know, being up in the county just a few weeks ago, talking to some of the businesses, they're really starting to try to figure out, what can we do to maintain a strong winter tourism season without necessarily having to rely on snow. And that's really a crazy thing to hear from business from the top of Maine that has historically been one of the most consistent places to have snow and to have snowmobiling. Um, so those are some of the trends that we're seeing. When it comes to some of the climate challenges that are out there. I do think that there's some opportunity to create some infrastructure and some things that can be taken advantage of that are less dependent upon weather. And I think when that can happen, I think that's good economically, just because it's just a little bit more resilience. Um, Not to take away from all the amazing outdoor recreational opportunity that we still have, because we still have some of the best snowmobiling in the country, skiing in the country, anywhere. And so we need to still be promoting and capitalizing off of what we do have.
That's a great point. You know, I'm always struck by how many people are coming to Maine for bird watching, for the culinary scene, and birds are going to come regardless of the weather. And I was thinking about how to capture some of these trends that are happening in society. It has been remarkable on some of these kind of more niche areas that have really become mainstream.
Right. And some other aspects, the way that youth sports have developed over the last decade or so, with travel teams and tournaments, have kind of shaped the way that younger families are traveling and how they're spending their money. And communities that can develop some infrastructure that has, sport complexes where they're able to have tournaments and have hotels that can host and restaurants that have um, the infrastructure that's needed to support visitors. That's a whole nother way to get other people into the state and to we're because we see shifts in how families are traveling and when they're traveling. And so those are a little bit less reliant on weather if they're indoor activities like ice hockey tournaments or something of that nature. So there's definitely some opportunity out there that is a little bit less weather dependent.
What are some areas that you see opportunity for growth geographically? We both know Bar Harbor well. I've always been struck by people during the peak time. That there's so much opportunity in Scudic Peninsula or getting a little further east. Furthermore, the mountains and getting up to uh, Moosehead Lake, Peaks Kenny area, western. Maine? Are we seeing growth in areas that have not historically been the hot spots of the beaches and trying to spread the wealth of Maine's tourism economy?
Yeah, so that's actually well within what one of the things that the Maine Tourism Association does, and also fits well into some of the destination management plan that the Office of Tourism has set forth. And one of the jobs that we have is we operate and manage on behalf of the state of Maine all eight of the visitor information centers. And part of that is to really roll out the red carpet, provide the best welcoming experience that really any visitor center around the country can offer. Provide information for what the visitor is looking for, but also information for more information than what they know to what to even ask for. Um, Really, the goal is to get them off the beaten path, show them more of what Maine has to offer, and that destination management plan that the Office of Tourism has specifies, trying to expose visitors to more of Maine, and to have a balance from the more of the well-known destinations to some of the lesser known destinations. And we've seen some of that happen. So that's always been part of what we've always tried to accomplish with MTA. Um, but we look at the balance. Because the beaches, mid-coast, down east, the coastal communities seem to be really always the hotspots, and they need to be. And we don't want to take anything away from that, but what we want to do is add to that and to provide a good visitor experience for the visitors when they come. So we know that Bar Harbor and Acadia are going to be busy during X, Y, and Z types of times. So how can we provide a good visitor experience for that person? Um, Having them go to Bar Harbor maybe at a less busier time and having them go to Schoodic or Winter Harbor. And we saw that happen last year. Acadia National Park was up around record numbers for visitation, but we saw the most amount of increase in the Schoodic Peninsula part of the park. So that's a clear indication of some of those efforts working, but also, other parts of the state too. I mean, our goal is we want people to go to the Forks. We want people to go to some of the lesser known state parks. It's a good balance for the local communities and also for some of the more lesser known destinations. But there still has to be a balance, because if we send visitors to certain destination, there needs to be the infrastructure and the experience that they are looking for. So, it's always about the visitor experience and what the visitor wants and what they need, and making sure that the communities that are there are able to support them. And there's always a little bit of that tug with local communities having the right amount of infrastructure from what they want to what they fear to what they want economically, what they don't want to have to deal with. So there's definitely a lot of growth um, and room for improvement when it comes to understanding the economic value of tourism in some of the local, more rural communities. And trying to minimize some of the fear factor that you're not going to become a Bar Harbor. Because a lot of communities will always like, "All right, well, I don't want to become a Bar Harbor." And I can assure you that nobody's going to become a Bar Harbor in the state of Maine. Bar Harbor is Bar Harbor because it has a national park. So
Right. Well, I will say I think Schoodic has some of the most beautiful views of Acadia. That's always on my list when people say they're looking for a local's recommendations. I guess I wanted to touch on some of the, public policy elements here, Tony. I've been struck sometimes by rhetoric that has started to actually have some momentum on taxing tourists, taxing seasonal residents more. And my mind always goes to the real way to get additional revenues to grow our tourism. But what do you think that speaks to? And how do we overcome that?
yeah, that's a big concern for me too. And I couldn't agree with you more that, one of the ways to generate more revenue is to have more tourism. This is not a new industry for the state of Maine. The tourism industry has been the most resilient and reliable industry consistently for the last 150 years for the state of Maine, easily, hands down. And so um, rather than it being looked upon as a hindrance or burden on communities, it needs to be looked upon as an asset and what's providing actual revenue for the communities. And a lot of people understand that, and we come out with all kinds of statistics as far as how much it contributes to local and state taxes, how much it pays in local wages. And the reality of it is those who, those numbers are actually meaningless when it comes to people who are dead set against, like, well, tourism is just a burden on our communities. And so we need to really have more conversations about how positive tourism is for Maine, the communities, how it has always been a positive impact, how much it actually generates for the local infrastructure. We wouldn't have the roads, the local hospitals, town services. A lot of the communities wouldn't have what they have if it wasn't for the tourism industry. Um, and so this industry really paves the way for so much more to happen. Yet it's looked upon as um as sometimes as a way that's just, it's it's, creating more of a burden on traffic, more burden on local infrastructure, more burden on housing. And there's always going to be challenges when it comes to balancing, any type of industry. But I think that we need to be getting out in front of those conversations a little bit more, um, and having a positive dialogue rather than fighting negative perceptions all the time. You know, um, there's a lot of people who have second homes here in Maine, and there's a lot of short-term rental challenges that are out there. We know that we have a housing issue here. We know that we have a workforce challenges here in the state of Maine. And so I think that we should start to be looking at tourism as a vehicle on how to help solve some of those problems rather than it being the problem. Because
Mhm.
tourism has been solving the problems for a long time. Um, when it comes to taxing more to the tourism industry, that's actually a tax on Mainers. I mean, anytime if we're going to raise the meals and lodging tax, Mainers spend so much time in restaurants. We're staying in local hotels too. So that's just an added tax on us. And we know that one of the biggest challenges when it comes to our industry, as it is to any other industry here in the state of Maine, is the rising costs. When we poll and survey our members, the number one concern is costs of doing business and inflation and the insurance costs, workforce costs, all these things are hindrance to doing business here in the state of Maine. So um very concerned about everything that's going on, and especially some of the rhetoric that's going on and some of the proposed taxes on tourism, because this is the one thing that works. This is the one thing that is resilient. So why are we trying to slow that down?
You know, I think most Mainers do want our tourism industry to thrive. They might have their own gripes about tourists, but they want our businesses to thrive. There's no question about that. And really puncturing through of how this would affect the industry, their lowness, their members of their community that are working in the tourism industry. So I think it's going to take some education, but it seems to have some momentum right now. The last public policy issue I wanted to touch on is just digital marketing tools. We've had debates in the legislature on data privacy. Can you give a sense on how we are marketing the state and how tourism related businesses are using these tools?
Yeah, and and to thank you to the state chamber, you, Patrick, and so many other partners, Hospitality Maine and retail, and um, so many other associations and businesses that stepped up to um, stop a really bad piece of legislation from happening with data privacy this past year. Uh, that the state of Maine obviously has a very robust marketing program, which comes from the Tourism Marketing Fund, which we really do everything that we can to protect. That's a big part of what our association provides to protect, and really it's the foundation to market. You know, they rely heavily on digital marketing, but that's on a larger scale. When it comes to the businesses, the local businesses, they don't have that capability. They don't have the large marketing agencies to be able to provide, big time strategies and marketing campaigns. They have to rely on the smaller digital platforms that make it easy for them to target market, and to be very mindful with how they're spending their marketing dollars, to be as impactful and get the most return on investment. So when it comes to any type of data privacy legislation that gets put forth in the future, it's really important that the legislators listen to the small businesses that are using it on the day to day. That makes sense for the consumer protection, but also for the business to be able to continue to do what they're doing. Um, it it really is. I mean, the way that visitors find information has changed drastically over the years. AI is playing a big role in that. Digital marketing has played a huge role of that in the last 20 years. Um, but we also know that traditional avenues still work in market. The traditional brochure and print publications are still the number one market influencer. And so, it's harder and harder for a business to maintain a strong marketing strategy because things are constantly changing when it comes to how visitors are receiving information, uh, being influenced by information, and how they can capture and create a new customer. And it's, our association, one of the roles that we provide is help educate and provide information on one legislation that could be harmful or uh, beneficial to the businesses and how it impacts them. But two, educating them on what the industry trends are, how to best take advantage of it, what's best for their business. It is so hard to get out in front of all the ways that consumers want to be communicated to. It's virtually impossible. And to take away a tool such as digital advertising would have been detrimental to our state and to the businesses.
Yeah. Well said. It's so foundational that when I have explained this to businesses on the bottom line and in the state house, that this is how they reach customers. Just that this is their core to new customer acquisition. Um, I did want to end just with if you're willing to reveal either any spots that are on your list for this upcoming tourism season. Happy to share mine, but Tony, what are you looking forward to
I
this summer?
I want to hear yours, Patrick.
Well, at first, I've been taking my kids every summer to a state park. We've done Sebago Lake, Peaks Kenny, and Lily Bay on Moosehead is scheduled for August, which I've been looking forward to since I've reserved it. Um, but we're also planning a trip to Monhegan Island. My kids have never been, and I think it's just a magical place. But our area that we kind of escaped to is down East Maine, just east of Ellsworth. We get about a week, and life does not get better.
Yeah, that's I mean, that's the way life should be, right? So I I'm always careful with how I answer this question because everyone wants to know where the secret spots are or what my go-to spots are. And like you, it's kind of different every year. There's so many places in Maine that we can go to and get away. And like you, I like to try to hit up some of the state parks with my boys, and We like to try to go fishing every year in different spots. Last year we did some striper fishing. Um, the the Bull Coast is definitely on the list for this year. And I've always had one of my favorite places in Maine has always been the Forks. There's just something that draws me to the Kennebec River up there, and the rafting experience is just so cool. It never gets old. But we usually try to rent a cabin for a week. Try to move it around the state every year. We haven't booked it for this year, and I know I'm late in the game, trying to figure out my schedule for the summer. But we usually, we're definitely going to do some bass fishing. And this is the gripe that I always have about Maine is that our summers are a little bit too short, and I get that summer anxiety that I have too many things that I want to do in a short amount of time. And working within this industry, we're busy. We're busy year round. But I also am fortunate because I get to travel to the state for work, and sometimes I get to take advantage of those opportunities when I'm traveling too.
Well, that's a great list. I took my family on the Bold Coast last summer, uh, hiked it with my parents, three generations. It is a magical section of coastline. And as a former raft guide, the section of the Kennebec doing magic. There's something about the noise, the pine trees surrounding you. It is just it has a this section that's just absolutely beautiful. So I think you got a pretty between the two of us, we got a pretty good Maine summer here,
Yeah,
Tony, and I hope to see you out on the trail somewhere in the state parks.
for sure.
Well, thank you so much, Tony, for joining us. The work you're doing on behalf of your members for the state's economy, such an important uh, position for our state, and look forward to collaborating with you as we try to build on what is really a cornerstone of the Maine economy. Um, for Patrick Woodcock, I am signing off for this week's edition of The Bottom Line. Please join us. We're bi-weekly. We'll be looking forward to having Senator Peirce, member of the state Senate, who will be joining us next edition of the Bottom Line to talk research and development and ways that we can build on our housing growth in our state. For Patrick Woodcock, signing off for the Bottom Line. Thank you and take care and enjoy this Maine summer.